All right, good morning. How is everyone? That great? Awesome. Okay, good. Couple of things before we get started with chapter 6 today. Um, there was a couple of videos that I was reviewing for the last couple of weeks where there was no audio. It was the videos that we did downstairs in room 303. I thought the overhead microphone was picking up the recording and it was not. So if you ever get to a video and there's no audio, feel free to send me an email and let me know. Hopefully, I will either have the other classes video I can share with you, or um, I can share a video from last semester that I recorded. So if there ever is an instance where, because there have been times where I just want to make sure I'm not on mute, because there have been times where I've recorded a whole lecture and I've been on mute the whole time. It happens. But don't feel, I feel like sometimes students are hesitant to point out when professors make a mistake because they're like, oh, they're the professor. I'm not supposed to question. I'm not supposed to, yes, you are. Yeah, if I made a mistake, point it out. I love it when you guys call me out when I put out wrong numbers up on the board. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep on going, thinking that everything's correct. So now, the way that you do it plays a role in how the message is received by your professor. Okay, so if you do it in a polite, courteous manner, then you're probably going to get a good response. If you do it in a not so professional manner, then you're probably not going to get a very professional response from your professor. So, um, and today we are not going to do an in-class quiz. Um, we pretty much are done with the in-class quizzes for now. And so really the focus is going to be on your project that you're working on your own outside of class. Okay. Today we're going to cover chapter 6. We may get to chapter 7 on Thursday if we get on chapter 6 today. If not, we'll finish up chapter 6. The process that I have used for this class in the past, which has gone over really well, is that once we finish chapter 10 in the textbook, the remainder of the classes are going to be independent study. Okay, meaning it's your time to work on your project. I will still be here in the classroom at 8 o'clock on Mondays and Wednesdays. So if you want to come in and work on your project and you have questions, then you can do that. If you don't want to come in, but you also are working on your project, then you don't have to come in. You can work on your own projects on your own time. Okay. You can save yourself a commute into campus on Mondays and Wednesdays. Okay. I will share once we get started with that process. I will share a different Zoom link than my office hours. And that one will be just used when it's our normal class time. And so if you want to log in, you can log in and not have to come all the way to campus, but you still have questions about your project. You can still log in during our normal class hours during that time. Okay. Any questions about independent study and what that means? Okay. The idea is that you are still working on your project. Okay. If you start getting behind in your assignments, I may send you a message and say you have to come into class and get caught up, and you don't have the option to do independent study any longer. Okay. I need you to take on that responsibility. But again, for those of you who are like me, if my professor says we don't have class, what am I going to do? Sleep, especially at 8 o'clock in the morning class. Okay. But if I get my homework done, if I get my project assignment turned in and completed before my 8 o'clock class, well, then great. I can go ahead and sleep because I've already done the work. But if my work is not being turned in, then I'm going to have to start coming into class. Okay. I don't want to do that because you guys are all adults. So let's talk about chapter 6. So in chapter 6, we're continuing on with the purchasing cycle. Okay. So we've kind of started out by getting our standardized recipes. We have all the ingredients that we need. Okay. And the first one is purchasing. That's the first stage. Okay. Then from purchasing, we go into receiving. So we've purchased the product based on what our standardized recipes say we need, the ingredients that we need. And now we're going to receive it. What are some tools that you think are required when you receive food and beverage orders? Actually, let's do this. I want you to think about 2 to 3 things, 2 to 3 items, and write them on your notes page. 2 to 3 items that you think are necessary or needed when receiving a food and beverage purchase. So take a moment. All right, compare your answers with your neighbor and see if you have any similarities. If there's any differences, you can add theirs to your list. All right. Who would like to share something from their list? Yes. All right. We need our invoice. We need that piece of paper. I'm also going to put what we call a purchase order. Okay. We want an invoice or a purchase order that basically tells the person who is receiving the food that this is what I actually ordered. I want to make sure that actually comes in. Compare that to that list. Okay. Good. What else? Yes. Why would we need a thermometer? Yes. If something comes in and it's supposed to be cold, what's the temperature supposed to be? 40 or below. If it's an item that is supposed to be frozen, we also want to make sure we're checking that. Okay. But we want to check the temperature because if we receive something, let's say it's a dairy product and it's at 50 degrees, am I going to accept that delivery? I wouldn't. Okay. Now, if the truck just backed up and it's like 42 degrees, that dairy product, and it's 110 degrees outside, so between the truck to your order to your back door, do you think it's plausible that it might raise by 2 degrees in 110-degree weather? Now 10 degrees in about 2 minutes? No. Right? So that's the kind of thing we want to be looking for. The purpose of the receiving and controlling our food cost is once we sign off on it, we pay for it. If I don't sign off on it, if I don't want it, if I reject it, I don't pay for it. Okay. And so if I sign for something that is not good quality, what's going to happen to that product? It's going to be wasted, right? And so we want to make sure. So yes, the thermometer, we want to test the temperature. What else? Okay, so I'm going to translate that to a trained employee. If you haven't trained somebody in how to receive the order and what they should be looking for, how are they going to know what to look for? Okay, you want to start looking for those things that, things like seafood. If seafood is supposed to be fresh, there's some characteristics that you can tell whether that seafood that is appearing fresh maybe has been frozen and thawed out, right? You learn about that in your sanitation class, okay? So we want to make sure that if we're ordering fresh seafood, that it's not frozen, that's been thawed to appear fresh. But if somebody hasn't been trained in what to look for, how do they know what they're looking for? Okay. Uh, Another example, when I was up in Maine one summer, fresh green beans were on special. And so basically the warehouse company was trying to get rid of this product because it was reaching the end of its shelf life. So they put it on special, it's discounted price. And I never ordered fresh green beans before. All my green beans had always been frozen. So I ordered it. It comes in this really cool like wooden box, right? And so I open up the wooden box, or I actually just take it and I put it in storage because I was going to use it like the next day. The next day comes for dinner, and I take that 15-pound box of fresh green beans and I open it up, and there's big clumps of mold on the inside because I didn't know to look for that. And so now I was like, okay, I bought 15 pounds of green beans, but now I probably only have about 8 pounds left because a lot of it is molded and it's bad. So the next time I ordered green beans, I opened that right up, sifted through it, and if it didn't look good, then I would send it back. Okay. When you sign for it, you pay for it. So I paid for 15 pounds of green beans. I only got to use 8 pounds. Now, granted, it was on special, so it wasn't a huge loss, right? But then if I look about it, if I think about my frozen green beans, what is my yield on frozen green beans? 100%, right? I don't waste anything because I know they're frozen green beans. And so sometimes it's cheaper to go ahead and buy, more cost effective to go ahead and buy the frozen because I know I'm going to get 100% yield out of it. Okay. So a trained employee is important. What else? Yes, a pen or a writing utensil. We want to be able to cross things off the list as it comes in. We want to check things off the list. Sometimes I like to also have, depending on the item, a marker so that I can date, like the cans, I can write the date that they were received. That way there's no question when I'm doing my rotation, my FIFO, which cans go to the back because the older dates are up in the front. Okay. What else? Okay, possibly a calculator. What would you use a calculator for? Okay. So not so much on the food cost because that's pretty clearly stated, but you do want to make sure that everything is calculated correctly. So if something says it's 10 pounds and it's $2.75 per pound, you want to make sure that that's calculated correctly. Okay. What else? This is it. That's all we need. We're ready to go receive some orders. Yep. So that's your purchase order. Yep. What you ordered before, the order that you submitted is your purchase order. The invoice is what they're going to give you when they arrive. That delivery driver arrives. Okay. So yes, go ahead, Noah. Okay, so we want to be able to put this product into where it's supposed to go, right? So we want to maybe have a clean storage. Bless you. So we want to have a clean and organized storage area. We already want to make sure we're going to pull that product, or if it's a refrigeration, we have enough place to put the stuff on the shelves. Can we just drop it on the floor and leave it? No, it has to be how many inches off the floor? 6 inches minimum off the floor. Okay. And so all those things, we want to make sure that we are prepared for that order to come in. Okay. Anything else? If my order says that they're giving me 58 pounds of brisket, how do I know that that brisket that's right in front of me weighs 58 pounds? I want to have a scale. I want to test that. Now, I want to be able to trust that they're going to tell me that that's 58 pounds of brisket, but I also want to double check that. All right. Anything else? Good. A box cutter or something to open up the boxes. I want to be able, if I get a box that has 6 cans of corn in it, am I just going to take that box? The box looks great. Let me just take it, put it on my shelf. No, I have to open it up and inspect all the cans. Because what happens if the cans are dented on the inside? If I sign for it, I pay for it. Should I use a can that has severe dent damage? Why not? Botulism is a potential, right? Contamination of the product. So all of those things we want to be able to. Um, delivery driver was coming in about 8:15, 8:30. I'm serving breakfast to about 60 people. I can't have this, I don't have the space available. I also don't have the attention span to be able to check things off the list, right? And so I'm cooking breakfast, and all of a sudden I hear the truck backing up. So I run out there and I see him, and I let him know, I'm getting ready to serve breakfast. I serve until 9 o'clock. Can you go to your next stop and just come back after? And he was like, yeah, sure. It's like, okay, great. So you would think that they would translate that to the following week. It did not. So I'm cooking breakfast and 8:30, I hear the truck backing up. So I go out there and I said, I'm sorry, sir, I can't receive the order right now. Um, can you come back? Can you go to your next stop and come back after 9 o'clock? And he was like, yeah, sure. So third week, same thing. And I said, sir, I have told you twice that I cannot. I was like, is it possible for you to reschedule me, rearrange me in your schedule? That if it looks like you're going to be here before 9 o'clock, if you just automatically go to your next stop and come back and see me, that would be great. And he was like, oh, yeah, sure, I can do that. So week 4, he comes in at 9:30. And I was like, this is awesome. Right. And so I had some leftover Rice Krispie treats from the night before for dinner. So I wrapped that up in some tin foil, made him a sandwich, wrote a little note, thank you for coming after 9, gave that to him. And guess what? For the rest of the summer, he came after 9 o'clock. Right. So there's something to be said about how you approach something, right? If I had just yelled and screamed at that gentleman, because he kept continually coming in late, is it frustrating? Or coming in early, is it frustrating? Absolutely. Does it take me away from preparing breakfast? Yes, it does, for about a minute or two, right? And so all those things are frustrating, but at the same time, how you approach it, if I had yelled at him, what do you think that's going to make him do, and how it's going to react when he comes to do my order? Right? He's not going to do anything to help me out. He literally would just come in, drop my order, and he's like, I don't care if it's before 9 o'clock. You're not a nice person. I was going to say something else, but I can't say that on recording. Okay. You're not a nice person. I'm not willing to work with you. And so sometimes we want to make sure that we are maintaining those relationships. Okay. Any purchase order or delivery discrepancies. So differences in what I purchased and what was delivered. Okay. Let's say I purchased Granny Smith apples. They didn't have any. So the company just took it upon themselves to substitute with Red Delicious. Now, if I'm putting whole apples out on my breakfast buffet, does it matter if I have Granny Smith or Red Delicious? Not usually. Okay. Unless, of course, it's a hotel and they specifically say you have to have Granny Smith, and that's an issue, right? But if it's not a standard, it's the whole apple. If I'm baking pies, does that make a difference? Granny Smith versus Red Delicious? Absolutely. So if they come in, sometimes on the order form, they'll just do substitute and say what they're substituting, and I have the option to accept it or decline it. Okay. So we want to manage those, and that's where we get into a credit memo. Okay. Now, a lot of times, because most people are doing things electronically. So if I had a discrepancy, the delivery driver would scan the barcode on the package, put in the code of why I'm rejecting it, and then I would sign for it, and that would happen all electronically. But there is also, I would send my boss an email and say, hey, this was rejected. Please don't pay for this invoice until you notice that the credit has been given for this particular item. Okay. So that's what the credit memo is. The credit memo basically outlines the discrepancies or the differences for what product was what product was rejected. All right. So we have 2 different types of inventory that we're going to cover. One is physical inventory, and one is perpetual inventory. Okay. Physical inventory is what? What's that? Yeah, what we can physically see on hand, right? We can go in there and count. If we walked into the storage room downstairs, we could go in and count exactly what we have on hand. That's our physical inventory. Okay. So physical inventory is what we can count. Perpetual inventory is continually being updated. So every time a server enters in an order of chicken parmesan, it takes one more out of our inventory, right? So perpetual inventory is constantly being updated. Now, ideally, our perpetual and our physical should match, okay? So that's what we're going to talk about today. When we are controlling the inventory that we have on hand, we can use a requisition sheet, okay? If you go downstairs right now on the first floor, or if you want to go after class, you can do that too. On the first floor in the back of the house hallway, okay, there's a whole bunch of clipboards lined up on the wall. Those are requisition forms. So those are what the chefs need for their classes this week. And so what happens is the chef will turn their requisition form into one of the culinary coordinators. And then the culinary coordinator will then purchase the food. They'll receive it. And then once it's in storage, they take that requisition form, either the culinary coordinator, or we also have work studies that will do that as well as a part-time job. And you basically go and you pull from all the stuff in the refrigeration and the storage to fill that requisition form. Okay. Kind of like what the HEB, the shoppers now, right? They get that form. This is the order form. They have to go through the whole grocery store, gather those items. It's the same thing, okay? But we do it based on the inventory that we have on hand, okay? So let's take a look. We have physical inventory versus our perpetual inventory. So when we're looking at this example here, okay, our perpetual inventory, let's do that one first. Perpetual inventory is our opening inventory. Plus any purchases minus any product that was issued. Okay. So that is our perpetual. So we start with something in our inventory. We purchase, we add some more items to it. Then we issue that, meaning we've actually sent it out. And then that gives us our perpetual inventory. Okay. So in this case, 10 plus 35 is 45 minus 37 is 8. Okay, so that's our perpetual. To find out whether we have a difference or not, or we have a missing product, we take our physical inventory and we subtract the perpetual. So perpetual says we should have 9 on hand. Or sorry, in this case, 8. Sorry, we should have 8 on hand. My physical, I actually do have 8. So my difference is 0. I'm good. My physical and my perpetual match. That means I have the product on hand that I need. Okay. So try this one on your own. All right, so what is 0 plus 55? Okay, so 55. We issued 47. So the difference is 8. Okay, so my physical of 5 minus 8 is -3. I'm missing 3 product, whatever this product is. I'm missing 3 of them. Okay, so let's say this is steak. So I start with 0 steaks. I add 55 to my inventory. Okay. I've issued and served 47. So I should put 8 back into my inventory. But now I go and count my inventory and I have 5. So I'm missing 3 steaks. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? That's a bad thing. Okay. That's a bad thing. You as a manager have to go and figure out, why are you missing 3 steaks? Okay. What's that? That is a very plausible option, is that the employees are taking them. Okay. This means that maybe three steaks were served without ringing a steak in. Now, if you think back on your shift and you're like, oh yeah, David messed up because he ordered the medium rare when they wanted it well done, and we had to recook a steak. Well, there's one steak that's missing, right? Because I rang in my first one. If I didn't ring in that second one, well, that's at least one steak that's missing. So you have to kind of go back and think about why you're missing and reconcile all of that. Okay, let's do one more. Those of you who have your packet stapled, I apologize. The physical inventory got copied onto the back of the first page. All right. We all get -1. We are all missing one item. Okay. So again, as a manager, it's your responsibility to then go back and figure out why we're missing one item. Okay. Now, you might think one item, that's not a big deal, but one item could very easily turn into 3 items. If you are not watching it, if you're not being careful, if people know that you are not taking inventory, if people know that you're not paying attention, this time maybe they got 1. And next time, maybe let's say this is, I'm just going to give an example. Let's say this is a package of hamburgers, right? And we're missing 1 package of hamburger patties. Well, that person has such an amazing barbecue using that 1 package that their friends came over more and they need to have 3 packages. So the next time they're going to take 3 packages because they didn't miss 1. Okay, I'm going to take another one, right? And so, I mean, I say that kind of half jokingly, but it happens. People walk out with your product if you're not paying attention to it. Okay. We can also basically keep in mind about the cost of our inventory at any given time by assigning what we paid for our inventory. So we're going to do that now. We're going to do this now as calculating our inventory and inventory turnover. Okay. So if you look, we have the cost of goods sold. Let me go to a different page real quick. All right, so we have costs of goods sold. For our cost of goods sold, we have our opening inventory plus all of our purchases. That is going to give me my total available inventory. We've talked about it in previous chapters. When does food become part of your food cost? When we use it. So if it's still in our inventory, it hasn't become part of our food cost yet, so we have to subtract our ending inventory. And that gives us our costs of goods sold. Cost of goods sold. Basically meaning all the food that we sold, this is the cost it took us to make it, right? Because our ending inventory is still in our inventory, we have not used it to sell yet, so it cannot be part of our cost of the goods sold, okay? So our cost of goods sold. We all got that on our notes page? Anybody need an extra little minute or so? Okay, go for it. Keep going. You're good. The total available inventory is the cost of all the ingredients that you had during that period of time. Okay. So we start with some product. We don't ever really start with zero unless we literally just opened our restaurant. Okay. So very rarely do we ever start with zero as our opening inventory. We purchase some product, it's added to what is there available, and then I pull from that throughout the time period. Whatever's left, I put it back in the inventory. I can calculate it. I can figure out how much that costs, subtract it from my total available, and I get my cost of goods sold. Okay. There's two more that we're going to work on. One of them is that's not what I wanted. Average inventory. And we have our inventory turnover. Okay. So average inventory. How do we find the average of anything? Add them up and divide by the number. So we're going to take our beginning inventory plus our ending inventory. And how many numbers do we have? Two odd numbers. So we divide by two. And that tells us what our average inventory on hand was throughout the month or throughout the period of time. That's our average inventory. All right. Then our inventory turnover. What does the word turnover mean? When you hear that word turnover, well, let me ask you this way. How have you heard that word turnover used? In what context? Employee turnover rate. What does that mean when you have employee turnover? People keep leaving, which means I have to replace it, right? I have to replace every time somebody leaves, I have to train somebody new and replace that position. Okay. So turnover in this case is the inventory we have on hand. How often do we turn it over and replace the inventory that we have on hand? Okay. Now, is there a standard? I don't think so, because it all depends on your product. Okay. If you are a fresh seafood restaurant, you are probably going to have a higher turnover rate than somebody who is no criticism, but if you're Fred's Fish Fry, where everything is frozen and you can keep things longer in the frozen state, you don't have to purchase as often. You don't have to turn your inventory as often. Okay. If you are someone who is a bakery that is constantly having to make product and that has a shorter shelf life versus somebody who like Cheesecake Factory who just buys their cheesecakes frozen instead of having to make their cheesecakes in-house, well, then you're going to have a different turnover rate. Okay. And so the more fresher short term or short shelf life items you have on your menu, the more turnover you're going to have. Okay. The other thing that affects our turnover is the space available. If you don't have a lot of space to store a lot of product, then you have to order more frequently. So you're probably going to turn your product over more often. Okay. So to get our inventory turnover, we want to take our costs of goods sold. That's what COGS stands for. And we want to divide by our average inventory. So our inventory turnover rate is the cost of goods sold divided by that average inventory. So let's do a couple of examples. All right. Oops. All right, here we go. So our first example, our beginning inventory is 1,500. We purchased $2,500 worth of product. So first we have to figure out what is our total available inventory. And then we figure out what our cost of goods sold is. Okay. So beginning inventory, our weekly purchases, are we adding or subtracting? We are adding to get, what's our total? $4,000 is our total available inventory. Okay. And then we are subtracting our ending inventory to get 3,500. That is my cost of goods sold. 3,500. Okay. So to calculate our average inventory, remember we take our beginning inventory plus our ending inventory and divide by 2. So what's my beginning inventory? $1,500 plus ending inventory of $500. That equals what? 2,000. And then I need to divide by 2. So my average inventory is $1,000. Okay. My average inventory is $1,000. Finally, inventory turnover. 3,500. That's my cost of goods sold. Divided by 1,000. And I get what? 3.5 is my inventory turnover. That means during this week, I turned my inventory over 3.5 times. Okay. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It depends. 3.5 times in a week, you're ordering quite a bit and you're receiving, which means you're paying labor dollars to receive that product instead of the dollars that maybe labor hours that could be devoted to prep cooking or whatnot. Okay. It may be that you're ordering too frequently, meaning that it is you're ordering too much. When I was working too little, too often. When I was working up in Maine, there was one summer where they had a fuel surcharge because fuel went so high that they added a $75 fee every time they delivered product. So how many deliveries do you think I got in a week? 1. If I didn't get it in that delivery, I was gonna have to wait till next week, right? Fast forward to 2018, my last summer up there was no fuel charge and there was no minimum delivery. And so if I needed something for the weekend and I just needed like an extra thing of bread because I was running low and I forgot to order it, yeah, I'm going to order just 1 box of bread of wheat and white. That's it. Because there's no surcharge. There's nothing that is stopping me or preventing me from realizing, do I want to pay that extra $75? Right? And so in 2018, I had more deliveries in a week versus the times when I was a little bit more careful because of the extra fuel surcharge. All right. So example number 2. What is our beginning inventory? Ending from the last time. What was our ending inventory before? 500. Okay. This time we purchased $4,500 worth of product. So what is our total available? 5,000 total available. Subtract my ending. My total cost of goods sold, 2,500. Before we do average and inventory turnover, before we even look at that, what do you notice that's different, significantly different between the previous month, or the previous week, and this week? Our ending inventory. We look at last week, our ending inventory was 500. This time it's 2,500. That's more product on hand. Okay. My weekly purchases from the first week was 2,500. Second week was 4,500. It increased by $2,000. So this tells me as a restaurant, I may be ramping up for a particular special event. Maybe there's a citywide something that's going to be happening here in the city, big convention that's coming into town. So I'm going to ramp up. I'm going to buy all this extra product so I make sure I don't run out. And then it rained all 3 days and nobody came out to eat. So I have all this extra product, right? Now, hopefully it's product that can last 1 more week. If not, it's going to go in the trash and that's going to be money that I paid being wasted. But you'll notice that next time I'm not going to have to order as much on the 3rd week because I have all this extra ending inventory that I'm going to use hopefully the following week, right? So it all kind of adds up and kind of evens out as you go. All right, so average inventory of 500 plus 2,500 is what? 3,000 divided by 2, 1,500 is my average inventory. Cost of goods sold divided by average inventory. So 2,500 divided by 1,500. And my inventory turnover is what? 1.6. Okay. $3.5. I turned my inventory over 3.5 in 1 week. This next week, 1.6. That means I have more product on hand. I didn't turn it around. I didn't sell it as fast as the week before. Okay. If my goal is to have a 3 to 4 inventory turnover and I have 1.6, is that a good number? No. 1.6 is not. If my goal is to have 3 to 4, turn it over, and I have 1.6, I'm well below that turnover. That means my product is sitting on my shelves longer than it needs to be. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns about chapter 6 and how, as we order, as we receive the product, as we store it, as we issue it, we can track how we turn the inventory over. Any questions on how we can use this in order to control our costs? All right. So since we are done with chapter 6, we are going to move on to chapter 7 on Wednesday. So please watch those videos, the chapter 7 videos that are in Canvas. So they're going to be in module number 8. So if you'll watch the chapter 7, lesson 1 and lesson 2, there will be a quiz on Wednesday over chapter 7.1 and chapter 7, lesson 1 and lesson 2. There's going to be a brief quiz beginning of class. So make sure you come in on time and ready and you've watched those 2 videos. I will allow you to have open notes for that quiz. So as you're watching these videos, take some notes about things that you're learning because I'll allow you to have open notes for that quiz. All right, thank you so much. If you came in late, come see me so I can get your attendance updated.